Hey guys, welcome back. Behind me is a Ford Escape. Wait, no, it's a Mazda 3. But we'll get to that later. It has a misfire. It does not have any codes. It's kind of a random misfire. Normally sets at low loads. The vehicle has just been tuned up. It has new plug boots as well. All original coils. So how do we determine what is causing the misfire? To me, it feels like an ignition misfire. It's random enough that I don't think it's an injector issue. How do we go about testing the ignition coils? Well, we could current ramp them. We could, hook our scope up on the primary side, watch our firing pattern. Or, since it doesn't do it all the time, we can find a way to load the coil. And Snap-on actually has it built into their scanner / scopes, a special test to load the coil and find out if it breaks down under load. And that's where you're going to find the most failures when doing this test. Unfortunately, Snap-on hides it in their system, and even though this Mazda 3 has the same engine as a Ford Escape, the test doesn't show up for a Mazda 3. So what we have to do is we have to go in under a Ford Escape and trick the scanner into looking at it that way. But do we want to check all the coils? I mean, 3 of them are underneath the intake manifold. 3 of them are easy to get to. What's the best way to get there? We're not counting any misfires. There's no misfire data, but we can access it via mode 6. Even though it is Mazda, it still has that data saved in there. So let's jump on the scanner. Let's pull up mode 6 data and see if we can identify what cylinder had the misfires. If there's none on there, then we may have to go another route. Okay, so we're gonna go into the scanner, select the vehicle, and we're gonna go to engine. Now I'll just show you real quick that there's no codes in here. Well, at least there wasn't earlier. Okay, we're not real concerned about that. No misfire codes, let's put it that way. So what we're gonna do is go to generic functions, and we're gonna go to the mode 6. So the $06 onboard monitored systems. Now, a little bit older Ford and Mazda vehicles, this will be a different test number. It's still under mode 6, but after 2005 or 4, they switch things around and it has a different identification. So down here at the bottom where it says A2, A3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I believe they used to list all of these under either test ID number 51 or 53. So we're just going to go through them one at a time and see if we can identify which one had the misfires. So it says current counts 0 and 0, cylinder 2, 0 and 0, cylinder 3, 0 and 0, cylinder 4. Here we go. Last 10 drive cycles, 172 misfires. Current drive cycle, 1 misfire. Just to make sure there's nothing going on and we don't have multiple cylinders, let's check 5 and 6. So it looks like we're going to be going after number 4. Number 5 had a few. And number 6 didn't have any. So I don't know if these were cleared after the tune-up was performed, if any of this is old data. Since there's only 172 counted on cylinder 4, I'm going to guess that the codes were cleared and this is new information. So on the Snap-on scanner, I'm going to go to the guided component test, load the Mazda. We're going to go to engine, and then we're going to go to ignition system. But see, Mazda has it laid out quite a bit differently than the Ford does. So we'll go ignition control module. All they have is a signature test, component information. Well, I don't know if this has an ignition control module because this is just like a Ford system and they're just 2-wire ignition coils. I don't see a module anywhere. The PCM is typically what commands them. So I don't even see a valid test in here that we can perform on these coils. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of this vehicle We're going to go back into component test, and we're going to lie to the system until it's a Ford Escape. I typically go as a 2005 because I know the test is listed under an 05, and you can use this exact same information on the Ford trucks with the V8. But you have to lie to it and tell it it's a Ford Escape. So ignition test, we want to go to the secondary test. RFI high output test, that's what we want to see. It will give us descriptions on how to test it, where to hook up, what leads we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the camera back on me. I'll show you what the test leads are and what we're going to do and how we're going to hook up. So this guy right here is kind of bent funny because this is how I always test these ignition coils. See how it has that little opening there? That clips on top of the coil, and it is a very accurate waveform of the firing pattern. Now, if you have a PicoScope, you might have the coil unplug wand. You can get a similar image from that, and we'll actually try that after we go through the snap-on setup. But I'll also hook this up to the Pico and see what kind of image we get, and then we'll have to decide what the snap-on scanner is looking at as far as the waveform. What part of the waveform are they looking at? So this is the ignition lead setup for the snap-ons. It's got a little RCA, so you can put different ends on here. What we're gonna do is, I already pulled the bolt out of number 4. We're gonna lift that coil out. I'm gonna hook this up, and let me just get that set up. I don't have my tripod here today, so I'll get that set up. I'll bring you guys back on and I'll show you what that looks like. So here is that clip installed from the top side of the coil down around the connector. Let's see if I can flip this around to show you guys both sides. And I bend this little 90 in the wire so I can flip the coil upside down like that to where it's not touching anything. We need to ground the test harness. It has a little, very short pigtail. I wish they would put a longer lead on that guy. And then we need to hook this up to the snap-on scope, then capture our waveform. So we got black to black, yellow to yellow. What I'm going to do is view the meter, and it always goes to half screen, but it automatically sets up all the trigger information that I need. So let's start up this car and see what the waveform looks like. I can scroll here to see what it's supposed to look like. So it says I should have that kind of little squiggly there, and it might look like that if we have a bad coil. And just as a note, the instructions say to unhook the injectors, but the injectors are located underneath the intake manifold, so that's not really going to work for us. That's not a real pretty waveform. That doesn't really look like that or like that. That's really kind of ugly. So is this test actually working for this vehicle, or is it a bad test? Well, let me shut the car off. We're going to swap this ignition coil with a new one and see what the waveform looks like. Okay, so I got the new one sitting there. Please do not touch the end of that. It'll give you quite a jolt. If you have a pacemaker or something like that, it could mess you up pretty bad, disable that, and send you to the hospital or worse. So don't touch the end of that wire. Make sure it's not going to touch your scanner. I'll actually move mine out of the way a little bit, so if that flops over, it's not going to short out on anything. Let's look down here at the waveform that we have. It's cutting off part of it on the screen, but that looks very similar to what I'm supposed to have. You know, we got a nice dip, a little rise, and then it levels back out. So what part of the waveform is this? Well, Snap-on doesn't really tell us, but what we can gather from the information on the screen here is that they have 200 microseconds up on the screen. Let me hit this button, see what kind of scaling they're using. 20 volts. So they're not even having this set as an ignition probe, they just have it on 20 volts. The trigger is at -4. So let's go in and set this up manually, and maybe we can adjust this a little bit. I want to put more time on the screen to see what part of the waveform they're looking at. So there it is right there. They're looking at the firing line, for that ignition coil, but they're zooming way in and it should have that nice curve. So now that we're on this, let me slap the old coil back in and see what it looks like with more time up on the screen. So there it is, just a little bit more noise right here at the firing line. So when Snap-on zooms in on that in the functional test, that's what we're looking at. So all of that noise right there means that the coil is breaking down internally under load and it cannot store the energy required to fire the spark plug correctly. So let me change over my setup and we'll try this exact same thing with the PicoScope. So what I have on the Pico here is I have my coil unplug wand, which I'm not using yet. We got a little interference here. Not sure if that's coming from the Snap-on wand. I have the Snap-on wand hooked up on my channel 2 here, which is red. And I think what I'll do is I'll zoom in here and let's put a trigger up on the screen. We'll go on channel B. Let's drop this down here where we know we're going to pick it up. And let's zoom in until we can see the same thing we were seeing on the Snap-on screen. So there it is. Let me move the coil unplug wand carefully over next to that ignition coil. We don't want to get anywhere near the end of the boot. We don't want to fry our PicoScope. But let's see if we can get the same signal. And hopefully we can. I don't know about that interference. I could just have a bad ground. Let me wiggle that a little bit first, see if we can clear that up. Doesn't look like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this wand next to the base of that coil away from the end of it and see if we can get a repeatable pattern. So it's a whole lot noisier. It looks like that coil is trying to fire and discharge and release its energy over and over again. Let me hold this next to, I'll zoom out. That's probably too much work. Let's swap coils so with the new coil and repeat this test and see what it looks like. So I have on the screen the new ignition coil. As you can see, there's a lot less interference on my other lead. So I'm guessing that that other coil was actually backfeeding into the harness and messing with the just the whole electrical system of the vehicle, which can cause all kinds of issues with communication. That could be why we have communication faults with the instrument panel cluster. We're not really sure because the communication seems to be okay right now. Let me grab the coil wand. And once again, we're gonna avoid the end of that coil. I'm just sticking it right down here next to the next to where I have this other clip. And my scaling's off a little bit. I'm clipping out. So let me adjust that real quick. So I actually had to switch over to inverted so I had enough resolution on the screen to see this coil. It's kind of maxing out. It even is right there. Okay, so just getting close to the coil right there. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful. Some tips and tricks for Ford coil unplug setups, even if they're in a Mazda vehicle. If you have the Snap-on scanner, go in under like 2005 Ford Escape. If you're using the PicoScope, just use some of the settings I had on the screen. I had anywhere from 200 microseconds to a few milliseconds on the screen. You might have to adjust it a little bit to get the resolution you need. It works with the coil unplug wand, although you may have to go to secondary ignition inverted to see the pattern. It'll be upside down. You'll just have to flip it over in your mind or run a math channel. But both scopes will work. The Snap-on one just has that guided test built in for you. The Snap-on lead does make it a little easier. It clips right on. You don't have to worry about it falling off. But if you guys don't have that already, then just use your coil unplug wand. Or if you have a homemade device, you can try that as well. And if you guys have any questions or comments, put those down below. Subscribe and click the bell if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.